Okay, as you're coming in to find your seats, I'd like to begin the panel. If you could quickly and silently find your seats.
Got it. There you go.
All right. Go ahead. Okay, my name is Patricia Luazan. I'm the Senior Assistant Dean in the undergraduate program office here in the McDonough School of Business. I also have the distinct pleasure of co-directing a program called the Entrepreneurship Fellows program here in the McDonough School. It's a program that serves students who are in their junior year and on fire for entrepreneurship. We're excited about the inaugural class that is taking their coursework and engaging in everything entrepreneurship here at Georgetown and certainly in the McDonough School, because they're a special group. They're a small and select group, and we're preparing to add to them with the class of 2014 group of fellows. So if there are any sophomores in the crowd, I encourage you to not only, there are a couple sophomores, and I encourage you to not only look at the Entrepreneurship Fellows program and see either myself or see either me or Jeff Reed, who is my partner in that enterprise, or tap an Entrepreneurship Fellow on the shoulder. We are having an open information session on that coming up, and the deadline for those applications are March 1st, and the application is online. So if you're in that select pool, you'll be hearing from us, and we encourage you to support even if you're not in the Entrepreneurship Fellows program. But this afternoon, we have this distinct pleasure of getting into even more deeply entrepreneurship and the ecosystem that exists around it. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jeff Reed, the director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative, who will moderate this panel. Jeff.
Thank you, Patricia. All right, we'll see if, there we go. Mics sometimes take a second to get going, but just trust it, they'll come on. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for being here once again. We do have another amazing panel, and so I am going to dive right in. Thank you guys all for being here. Let me just ask each of you in succession to briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current entrepreneurial venture.
Great, thanks, Jeff. My name's Tony Surak. Briefly, I'm a DC native, born in Southeast, grew up here, went to school, lived out west, came back. I'm involved in two ventures right now. One is a software business called Social Spring. We sell collaboration tools that are based on social principles for big companies. And then I'm also a board member and early investor of another company which I think could be very helpful for you folks here, and that is Startup Hire. If you're looking for a job and want to get involved in a startup venture and don't know how to do it or where to find them, type in startup jobs in Google, and Startup Hire will be the first link that comes up. It's the largest database of venture-backed and growing angel-backed companies in the U.S. And it has openings and opportunities across any kind of function. So a great resource to get involved in the startup ecosystem.
I'm Catherine Cook. Okay, making sure. I actually just recently graduated from Georgetown back in May. The company I'm involved with in my yearbook, I actually started when I was in high school. And we recently, it's a social network for meeting new people. And now, since we recently merged with the K-Pasa Corporation, we're the public market leader in social discovery. So it's a really fun company. We have about 100 people up in New Hope, Pennsylvania. We're the, actually, more than 100, or about 120 people now up in New Hope, Pennsylvania.
My name is Melissa Bradley. Most importantly, I too am a Hoya. I graduated undergrad business school in 1989. I currently do 3 things that are entrepreneur related. I'm the CEO of Tides, and we basically manage high net worth individual money and help them reinvest in social enterprise. We do charitable, we have equitable giving in hybrid organizations and those businesses and nonprofits doing good. I also continue to be an angel investor as the managing and founding director of New Capitalists. We invest in women and minority-owned firms across the country. And most recently, I was part of the team of alumni here at Georgetown University that launched the Georgetown University Entrepreneurship Alliance.
Hi, my name is James Patterson, and I've been involved on the ground floor of several startups, but actually right now I get to have my cake and eat it too. I'm at Capital One, and my responsibility is to build out a startup within the company. There's a lot of really interesting things happening at the intersection of social, mobile, and emerging payments that are going to have a huge impact on these large financial institutions, and so we are building up a startup, and we have a separate office in Clarendon, and the goal is, I think we're just hiring lots of people who have lots of ground floor startup experience so that we can bring that capability to Capital One.
Great. I'm Meghan Roman. I am a '96 grad from the undergraduate program here at Georgetown. And I spent most of my career out in the West Coast working with companies in Silicon Valley. And when I returned to the East Coast, I started my own PR consultancy. So what I do is I help venture capital firms, web businesses, and technology companies package their story and generate awareness. And given the influence in the US of the press, that's generally an avenue that, that I work with the most to sort of get the word out about technologies that have never existed before. And increasingly using social media as another marketing avenue to do that.
Hi, I'm Matt Myers. I'm a 1995 MBA alum. First of all, let you know that these facilities are really nice compared to Old North. I took an entrepreneurship class while I was here, and I remember my professor was Smith Wood, and he brought in entrepreneurs. And I got to listen to Jim Kimsey speak, who started AOL, and afterwards I approached him and was contacted with people at America Online, where I had an internship my second year and consulted there. And ever since, when I was here, I'm dating myself a little bit, but I saw the internet for the first time. I knew I wanted to work in the interactive space. I spent 3 years at United Airlines, launched their first few websites, the Star Alliance sites, began an interactive agency that was performance-based, generating calls and forms and leads for companies for 10 years. Ran that in Baltimore. I co-founded a couple years ago a mobile promotions company called Sugar, S-H-O-O-G-E-R, with actually my best friend from, at the time, GSB, but now McDonough School. And then just recently, within the last year, began working at a company called Personal. You can check us out at personal.com. We launched our public beta in November. I'm in the process of rolling out a couple of apps. The idea behind the business is that consumers, which we call owners, should ultimately be able to be in control of their data. And that means being able to manage, maintain, and ultimately directly benefit from the use of data, whether they're sharing that with other individuals, themselves, or with companies.
Great. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And as we've titled this panel about the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I wonder if you guys can talk a little bit about what that might mean to you. You know, different people may have a different definition of what the entrepreneurial ecosystem is, but what does that term mean to you? And maybe another way to ask this is, how have other people helped you along the way? And I'll just open that up. Anybody can give us an answer whenever you're ready.
Well, I'll jump on that because the ecosystem is one of the driving thoughts when myself and my two partners started Startup Hire. When I finished my MBA and wanted to also get involved in a more entrepreneurial venture in the mid-90s, it was a challenge to just meet people who had a like-minded spirit to do that. And it was, and it still is, a lot of it is just brute force networking. I mean, who do you network with? Well, accountants, lawyers, angel investors, VCs. These are some of the professionals that get involved in more formalized formation of early stage companies. And back then, there wasn't any real place to go. I mean, the web, you mentioned 95, internet was just being talked about on a broader consumer basis, there was no place to go. There was a program called Entrepreneurship back then that tried to gather these people together, and Mario Marino, his investments in groups, kind of tried to create that environment. But so that's my perspective on the ecosystem. Startup Hire was created as a way to help alleviate and remove some of that friction in trying to figure out, well, simple things like where are the startups that are out there, and what are they doing, and is there an opportunity to get involved? That's these lawyers and other professionals and real estate people, they know where these early stage people are hanging out and doing things, and they're all part of that ecosystem.
So I'll flip that, because I think you need the professional ecosystem and the personal ecosystem. When I started my first company, I had graduated from Georgetown. I was working for a year, and I couldn't get anybody to invest in me. I didn't have the social capital of friends and family who were going to give me $250,000. And so it was my roommate who was willing to float the rent and the electricity bills, and my mom who was willing to take over a payment of my student loans and help me get started. And so essentially, with total debt from the get-go, I was able to grow that company, and we ended up selling it 2 years later. But I think people oftentimes go to the professionals, but as someone who's done this a few times, you cannot underestimate the need of your roommate or your parents or your friends, because your life is going to be complete hell and totally consumed by work. I have 6 kids right now, and I could not even consider taking this job unless my partner recognized that I was going to be on a plane every single week commuting between here and San Francisco. And so I think that it's great to talk to the venture capitalists, et cetera, but at the end of the day, the venture capitalists will hang up, and who's the next person you're going to call? And it's your family. And so as somebody who's now created 4 different companies, I cannot underestimate, I know it sounds crazy, particularly if you're about to graduate, the last thing you want to do is call your parents for help. But if you're a graduate student and you're married, you know you need to ask your family for help. And so just own that right off the get-go. And I think that oftentimes we underestimate that, because it's the non-financial capital that oftentimes make a difference when you're trying to make payroll.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, using, your personal network to help you. I have to say, some of the most important people in my career have been, on the venture capital side. I used to work with Venrock, which is the venture firm that was founded by the Rockefeller family. And the investors there get so involved, so personally involved in the companies that they support, and then the people that sort of are in their orbit. So when I started my PR advisory, they sent me my first client. And then they came back and needed my help. When I moved to the East Coast, I was introduced through a friend to New Atlantic Ventures. This is a fairly young VC firm that helped bring text messaging to the US and movies to the web. And so I started to work with them. I work with them to this day. And in that process, they've continued to send me additional business opportunities in their portfolio and beyond. And I think that they're a huge force, and they've been hugely helpful to me, in my venture.
Yeah. I think something interesting to say about the entrepreneurial ecosystem is just how much it can spread and how you notice how your role in it changes throughout the time. So back when I was 11, I was a aspiring entrepreneur. And what made me that was seeing my brother start his own company and just seeing what a completely different lifestyle it is, because it does take over your life, and there's nothing you can do about that. But at the same time, I loved the idea of it. So I went from aspiring entrepreneur to getting the idea, and then there's the initial phase of the company where networking is a huge part of it, and trying to find people that will actually listen to you, and trying to figure out who you can find that could give you that support. So aside from your family, there's also people you meet at conferences and that you go to that end up completely shaping how you do things. For instance, I met one of our strategic advisors because we were sitting next to each other at the same lunch table at a conference in Palo Alto. And it's just like small world things where you have to get yourself out there and see who's in the space and just start conversations. And now I'm finding myself, now after going through the merger that I'm in another area now where I'm also advising people and trying to pass on the entrepreneurial torch to have someone else start their own thing and try to pass it on. So I find it interesting that just knowing an entrepreneur and can greatly affect your life and affect the chances that you actually start something. So you need to talk to them. You need to get out there, and that's what really makes it happen.
I would say take the time to get to know what you're passionate about and follow that passion. And at the end of the day, I can tell you that I've created 3 jobs for myself that didn't exist by the discussions I had with organizations because I was really passionate about the space or how something should be structured or set up. It comes through. And I think a lot of companies and a lot of people who are entrepreneurs and who are driven will have conversations with you. Put yourselves in positions like today to talk to us afterwards or during this panel to really bet on yourself. I mean, that's what I would say. And as an entrepreneur, I started, like many of you guys, really young, selling candy and lawn businesses, and in college I had a deck building business, and it's sort of one thing after another just keeps going. Now I have 3 kids, and now I want to instill that in their lives. And my middle daughter wants to be a baker when she grows up. She watches all the baking shows and everything else. And so I want to help her discover that and say, here's how you run a business, and here's how we can distribute your cookies or your cupcakes, so that she has that passion, so that when she goes to school or wherever she goes, that she follows her heart and ultimately bets on herself. So I'd say reach out, give back where you can, and bet on yourself, and the passion comes through whoever you end up talking to.
So a question for the panel. For those, one of the most common questions I hear from students, they catch the bug about entrepreneurship for one reason or another. They're really interested in entrepreneurship, but yet they don't have the idea that they feel passionate about. They want to do something entrepreneurial, but maybe they're not going to be the founder, at least not yet. What advice do you have for someone who really wants to pursue some sort of entrepreneurial career, but maybe doesn't have their own idea that they want to found a company on?
I just have to say I have a huge respect for corporations and for sort of the corporate career track, because that's where you build your skills, where you get your experience, where you build your network of friends and colleagues, and where you get to experiment to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And it's really just a journey that you can take, that the corporation can help you, can help you along with that. And once you get to a place where you've discovered sort of what you're good at, and you feel like you have a nice foundation, then you can take the leap. So it doesn't have to be an either or, but you can certainly leverage your corporate experience to sort of test the waters. And it gives you a nice safety net because you have a steady paycheck while you do it, and while you create your big idea.
Just to, I agree 100% with that. One thing I wish I knew when I was coming out of undergrad was the management consulting route. If you have an opportunity to get into that, is an excellent opportunity to just get immersed into some industry at a pretty high level and learn about the various trends and the mechanics, the economics of a particular industry. And you may love that industry, and that can be leveraged into so many other career steps after that, be it in the investment community or even starting a company or taking on a leadership role in one of those areas. But when I was graduating from my MBA program, I struggled with that whole question of how do you develop an idea, to go off and start a business. And I always had this preconceived notion that you had to have an aha idea in the shower to go, I got to go start a company to do that. And that's such a small percentage of the time that companies get started. It's usually just sitting back and going, what am I passionate about, and how does that business run today? How do people supply that? How do people do things there? And just kind of ask yourself, is there a better way of doing that? And start there and noodle around different ideas and concepts. And going along that journey and path, your ears and your eyes are in tune now to that topic, and you start learning about it, and then you may have that aha moment, but it could be just a real obvious thing after a while of thinking in that area. Can I do it better? Can I do it faster? Can I do it cheaper? Can I serve a different market that isn't being served that way? I mean, taking a lot of the mumbo jumbo that you study in class and applying it in just real simple terms in an area that you're passionate about. And you will get an idea. You will get an idea. Or you'll discover another company that's early stage that's doing it, and that could be an opportunity to jump on with them and cut your teeth from an entrepreneur perspective in the area that you're interested in.
I would just say do what you can afford to do. Because if it's not your idea and you're not that passionate, I mean, because you're here at Georgetown and also in Washington, D.C., and there's tons of connections to be made, you'll have the opportunity to go to a startup and hang out there. But if it's not your idea and you're not passionate about it and you're not getting paid enough, you're going to hate it and you're going to miss everything you should be getting out of it. So I would just really be honest about that, you know, because there's tons of opportunities to volunteer, to become an intern, to hang out and catch the bug and get the conference. And so the reality is, unless there's somebody who is a Rockefeller relative, sitting up here, you're going to need all the resources you can when you start your company. And so I think it's going to be important that you are able to take this interim period while you're starting it and absorb all the data, whether it's running a P&L of a couple $1 million or traveling around for Ernst & Young or whoever's left in all the acquisitions. But the key is do what you feel like you can afford to do. And I say that because I've had peers who came out of Georgetown and they went and worked at a startup and they were making literally no money and they couldn't afford it. And so they were bartending at night and they would miss half the days. They ended up quitting out of total frustration and missed that huge opportunity. I don't think you're going to find any entrepreneur who's going to turn you away if you want to come in and learn anything about the business. So I would say if you need to get a job and make sure you're milking it for every possible thing that you can. I hated corporate America, but it was the greatest contributor to me to understand how to really manage a P&L and make those hard decisions around HR and finance, et cetera, which ultimately you have to do every day as an entrepreneur, and your stakes are a lot higher because it's your money, it's your collateral, and most importantly, it's your brand.
Yeah, I think especially for a lot of people coming out of business school, I mean, life is very nonlinear. Do not look at your career as a straight line where you're going to be headed in this direction and these rungs you have to keep going up. All of my best opportunities come from friends that I've met through being in the ecosystem. And I think especially in this room, when you're a little bit younger, you have very little to lose. Even when you think you do, you really don't. And so when you think about that, I mean, one other really tactical thing you can do is if you're going to live in this area, the first thing you would do is look at all the companies that are making news that maybe are beyond the 2- and 3-person shop, but a little bit larger than that. I put a lot of stock in just getting into something, rolling up your sleeves. If you're somebody who's super motivated, high energy, I mean, there's companies out there, they're all dying to find you guys, right? I mean, it's actually here in terms of the startup scene, especially if you're in engineering, there's a huge shortage. I think if you're really a savvy person, high energy, you're willing to roll up your sleeves, one way is simply just to get involved. And you'll find that the people you meet and the things you work on will randomly lead to all these other opportunities and these friendships and the network you could have never planned on. I think a lot of it is just having faith in, and I like all the comments around passion. You have to do something you're passionate about. Don't put the labels away about entrepreneur this or risk or not risk. It's more about finding something you're fired up about. And if you're fired up about something, you do really good work and you get into the scene and you get hooked up with a bunch of builders and people in the tech community, or if it's not the tech community, but basically just the startup community, you'll find that all kinds of really random goodness happens. So I think the first step is just to get into that community and do great work and roll up your sleeves, and you'll find, again, that it'll lead to a lot of things you would have never expected.
I would, yeah, speaking of one of the hot companies in the area, Matt, why don't you tell us about Personal and how many students you're going to hire?
Well, actually, please, I'm here as well with a coworker, Karen Sipple, and we are actually looking for internships through the year or the summer. I just want to give one final thought on sort of starting a business with the idea versus working at more of an early stage company. And I would say, draw the distinction between sort of large corporate America, what you maybe have come from, and working in a smaller startup type environment. I was an intrapreneur for a little bit, where I basically ran a cost center and turned it into a profit center. So I had to be more or less profitable from day one. And I had a great boss who just let me check in once a quarter and just run my business, or the company's business. It wasn't my business, but versus starting a company from scratch, which is really hard, sometimes really long hours, really little pay. There's a lot of difficult times in starting a business, versus now where I currently work at Personal, 5 co-founders, of whom I'm not one of, and I'm on the management team there, and raised money from very serious blue chip investors like Steve Case and Ted Leonsis and Allen and Company. But the idea behind Personal is, that right now we don't participate in any discussions about how our data is used anywhere. And so we've launched with what we call a data vault, Personal Data Vault, for you to house important information in your life. It's all housed in a structured format, so it's machine readable by third parties. And ultimately, if you choose to share that, that could result in a dynamic experience, so a customized experience around you. But ultimately, the vision is that marketers will pay you directly as you share information about yourselves to increase their conversion and ultimate revenue opportunities, as well as for yourself. And you won't feel many times today that your data is passing hands without your input, consent, or visibility.
So you mentioned working in a bigger company, being entrepreneurial. James, I'd love to get your thoughts. Capital One is not a startup. A few years ago, bigger banks probably looked at Capital One as a startup, and now Capital One is what, the 5th or 6th largest bank in the country?
Yes.
So you guys have innovated your way towards the top, and now, if I understand it correctly, your role is to help the company stay at the top and not get out-innovated by the newer companies. So tell us what it's like to be part of a big company and trying to make it entrepreneurial in that large environment.
So my first tour of duty was at AOL as my first big company experience. And I echo a lot of things. There's a lot of great experiences you can glean from that. A lot of the people living social went from AOL to Revolution Health and then to their own venture. So there's a random walk there. I think you just kind of have to get into the game. At Capital One, it's really not an obvious choice. Again, through kind of personal network, I found out through a friend, having a beer over the weekend, that they were starting this about a year ago, starting a new digital innovation lab within the company, basically building out a startup within the company to do things that it can't do otherwise. And the cool thing about Capital One is it's actually a very entrepreneurial company. We're still run by our founder, Rich Fairbank. And for those in the room, probably too young, but back in the day, in the late 80s, credit cards were all at the same rate, 19.8%. And he had this crazy idea that more credit-worthy people should have a lower interest rate than less credit-worthy people. And he got drop-kicked out of every building he went to sell this idea to the different banks because everyone was happy with their margins. And so he went out and started the company himself. So I think the first thing is, you need to be, if it's in a big company, it helps to be in a big company with entrepreneurial DNA. And we're still run by our founder, and I think that's a huge difference. It was very surprising to me when I got into the company that even though it's not the most obvious place, there's lots of entrepreneurial people with that attitude. And I have to say this is my dream job right now because I've been a part of startups. I've been in really poorly funded startups, really well-funded startups. It really sucks to be eating top ramen all the time. But you learn different.
Eating what?
Top ramen. And,
top ramen. Oh, okay. You guys were top ramen. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's better to just kind of figure out what you want in life, right? So a theme in my life is I've always liked to build things. I like the idea, and it's better than ever. It's the best time ever in the history of mankind and womankind to be able to reach tens of millions of people really easily and not with a lot of capital. I've always had a passion for building products through technology and trying to improve the day-to-day lives of millions of people. Capital One has that platform. We have 70 million people. We just bought ING Direct, which is the country's top digital bank. A lot of really entrepreneurial people there as well. And I think it's just one of those things, again, you'll have to find your own path, but for me right now, to have the opportunity to build basically a startup within a really well-funded company, again, you just kind of figure out what you want to do. But in my case, I want to be able to impact tens of millions of people. If you're going to do that in the financial industry space, you have to have $200 billion in deposits. You can't be some scrappy startup with no money. You have to have a really strong platform of customers and a number of deposits to be able to do things like give people credit. So again, I would probably back up and ask yourself, what are my goals? Like, what really turns me on? And then the rest kind of takes care of itself. And even though a lot of my friends still ask me, what are you doing at Capital One? It fits very perfectly with what I'm about and what my goals are and what really turns me on when I get up in the morning.
Great. So a couple of you have talked about what it's like to be, kind of how life or your career goes from one place to another, or you're in a small company one day and a larger company the next. So Catherine, I'd like to ask you about that experience for you. So I've heard you tell the story before about how, this is one of my favorite stories, apparently if you're 15 years old and raising venture capital, and you...
I was 16 when we raised our first round, actually.
16, okay.
15 when we found
My bad. 16 years old, you said it was really difficult when you haven't hit your growth spurt yet to get the attention of VCs. But you were successful, all right, and the company was sold, acquired last summer. It was announced in the summer, closed in November. $100 million acquisition. You were a co-founder, one of the leaders of the company. Now you're part of a bigger organization. You know, your title is now vice president instead of CEO and those sorts of things. So how has life changed now that you're part of a bigger company?
It actually hasn't changed that much, to tell you the truth, because it's very, one of the things that we loved about K-Pasa was that they were very, very, they wanted to get things done too. And so going into the deal, we had very similar thoughts of where we wanted the company to be. And so the reason why we decided to do the merger was because we saw my yearbook on its own, we're 90% US, and we thought, you know, being able, like, we've taken this as far as we can, we want it, but to be a global brand, or to be a $1 billion brand, you need to be a global brand. And we think that there is a $1 billion brand, that there will be a $1 billion brand around meeting new people, but we thought that we needed to get there faster. So we wanted to have a global footprint, and then, you know, we started talking with K-Pasa, and they're very big in South America, and so we saw the ability there to not only double our user base, but also triple our addressable market, which we define as people between 13 and 24. And at the same time, completely double our development team so we can get more products out faster to a larger audience. And I've got to say, since announcing the merger and since closing the merger, nothing's changed. We've gotten a lot done with the last few months. We launched our iPad app, which is, you know, if you have an iPad, check it out. It's probably the best way to view my yearbook. I love that app. But so we launched the iPad app, and we have like a full pipeline of things to be doing. And so even though now, you know, it's a bigger company and we have more people, I feel like none of the creative has gone away. We're still have the entrepreneurial grain where we're gonna get things done. We're gonna work as fast as possible, and it feels like every single project we have is even more crazy than the next one. For instance, right now, one of our features that will be rolling out actually in the next few weeks is we'll use location in ways that we've never used it before and so I don't know, it's just still just as fast paced as it had been when it was just me and my brothers, and then when it was just me and my brothers and the 100-person team.
That's great. So you guys have talked about how you've used your friends and other personal networks over the years to find different opportunities. For someone who is a student, maybe a grad student, maybe an undergrad, what are some ways they can get involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem? You know, what are organizations or networks or events, you know, other than coming up to you later and asking you for a job or an internship, what are some things people can do to get involved, maybe in the DC community or elsewhere?
Well, I'm a fan of the Entrepreneur Organization and the Global Student Entrepreneur Program. I actually participated in the program last year, 2 years ago, I think last year. And you meet some really great people that are all very like-minded and just either trying to get something off the ground or already got something off the ground. And I think those networks are great, and they're always looking to talk to more people, and a bunch of these organizations are just they have lots of conferences that you can go to and just hear their ideas. And a lot of times, if you're a student, you also get like special student discounts and stuff if you're going to them. So I think using those organizations, and also, I mean, at Georgetown, you have Kairos and Encompass Partners that you could also work with and talk to and figure out ways. So there's tons of organizations now that you could count on to kind of, I don't know, loop you into this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's really, I've seen explode over the last couple of years, is the number of organizations through a lot of social media learn about different events. You know, DC Tech Meetup here for local folks. The Entrepreneur program is still in place. There's DC Tech Week that is held every, I guess it's in the fall. There's another good week-long set of events that go on here in the DC area across all kinds of different industries, not just technology or social startups. Tons of stuff to read online. VentureBeat, TechCrunch, to get you more exposure. The Kaufman entrepreneur site, which is there to help drive angel-backed entrepreneurship. So you know, you just go down that corridor of opportunities and weave your way through, and you'll find that you'll get networked in. You just got to jump into it. You never know where it's going to lead.
Yeah, I think that there's a few different organizations that I think just bring quality people together, and just in an environment that's conducive to, you know, socializing. I think there's a guy named Paul Sherman who runs Potomac Tech Wire, and so you can sign up for the daily newsletter if you want. It's Potomac Tech Wire, and he puts on interesting events all throughout the year. They might be breakfasts that feature a panel of VCs, or just yesterday he featured a breakfast with a panel of entrepreneurs, and so you can meet people that way. A more casual atmosphere is, there's a company called Tech Cocktail, and they're two individuals that have started this, and they are just great community builders. They're based here, and they'll do like a cocktail mixer every quarter. The next one is February 16th. I think it's going to be on K Street. But they put together just like fun events that bring together great crowds. The other thing that we'll start to see more of is Steve Case is involved in this Startup America partnership, and they're starting to take this down to the state level. Now, what they decide to do between Maryland, DC, and Virginia is, I mean, up for debate. My opinion is it should be together so that, you know, we can build a more centralized community of entrepreneurs in the metro area. But that's something to just kind of keep your eye out on.
Two things. Startup weekend also throughout the country, if you want to sort of feel the buzz, or if you're technically oriented, coming together to build apps in a weekend's time frame is another potential way to connect. And I'll never forget when I was here in school, we, in our production operation management class, were given Nucor Steel as our company that we had to study. Okay? So we called up Kenneth Iverson, the CEO, and he took our call for an hour and a half, our group, on the phone. And it left me with an impression that if someone's interested in talking to you, whoever they are, wherever you are, try to make time for them. And I think if you called or emailed anybody at Personal and said, hey, I'd really like to grab a cup of coffee and understand your business more, learn, we'd take the time to do it. So if there's something that you're interested in, it's not hard to go online and find out, you know, the management team and send off an email, and you'd probably be surprised at, you know, the amount of time that people will be willing to spend with you if they can sort of feel your passion and drive on the other end.
You say from a non-entrepreneur perspective, building what you said. I mean, a lot of times there's tons of places to go, but the core of your business is about your ability to innovate and your ability to be inspired and think beyond the box. So respecting people's various price points, I would say go to TED or go to TEDx. And just relax. Like, don't think about business, but think about what's really happening in the world around you. Where are there new market opportunities? Where are there new client segments? Because you're sitting in this room, it automatically means you have some level of social capital. Get yourself invited to a Renaissance weekend. But really think outside. I haven't gone, so I can't, but I've heard great things. But think outside the box as well. I think so much of being an entrepreneur is about being creative and being able to look at things differently. And so there are quirky things that you should think about spending time on and investing in. I never thought I would go to TED, and now I go all the time because it's not about business, but just listening to people and what their perspective is and how they view the world. The other thing I would say, which is ironic, is thinking about where do entrepreneurs hang out that you could just be affiliated or have casual conversations, so building on it. Busboys and Poets, I remember when Andy opened that place, it's full of entrepreneurs. And so just think about where do I want to spend a couple of hours just to be immersed and have casual conversation. I think the biggest thing that I would say that I will, we all must have had Newport Steel, maybe they'll change sometime soon, but is that we oftentimes when you're in a business school environment, you're taught about transactions, but you don't talk about the transformational relationships that can happen about being an entrepreneur. So I think I just want to say, take the permission to be able to relax for an hour to a week and do something, go to the museum, do something totally unrelated to business, and I guarantee you it will make your business and your mind a whole lot sharper.
Good. In just a minute, we are going to take some questions from the audience. I'm not sure what happened to our microphones that were here, but we'll try to find you one. If anybody wants to line up, we'll make sure your question gets heard. But while we're doing that, I do want to give Melissa a chance to talk a little bit more about the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Alliance, which is part of our growing entrepreneur ecosystem here at Georgetown.
It is a budding ecosystem. So first let me say it is something that is designed to be supportive to all that is happening here at Georgetown. As many of you may know, the Alumni Association is known for creating these alliances, and one of the more famous ones, well, I guess depending on age, was the Wall Street Alliance. And then many more know GEMA, which is the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance. The idea is really creating a space, either literally or figuratively, for alumni to get together. And what became clear is that there were many of us, if you look at the history of Georgetown, that have had some kind of entrepreneurial experience or are continuing to do so. And the idea was, how do we harness that? Because while I am a huge fan of Jeff's work, unfortunately, to anyone in administration, it's only one person. And so we lag way behind in our peers, whether it's Cornell, Stanford, or NYU, around our entrepreneurship focus. But the reality is it's been a hot incubator for entrepreneurship. So how can the Alliance, and basically a loosely formed coalition of alumni, who are not only entrepreneurs but also sit in other alumni alliances like Wall Street or the Tech Alliance, come together, support the initiatives, provide guest speakers, provide content for John Carroll and for alumni, our homecoming weekend, be able to serve as mentors, serve as resource experts. So right now we have about 167 alumni who have signed up for this alliance to be able to give back to the university, and most importantly, give back to many of you. We sent out a survey and we asked them, would you be a mentor? Would you hire folks? Would you help produce content? So the idea is to really expand the ecosystem that Jeff is working on and the business school is hosting, but how do we really get the word out that despite where we may sit on the entrepreneurial index of Newsweek or others, that this is a place, although we are in Washington, D.C., that entrepreneurship can really grow and bloom. And we have people who have started investment banks on Wall Street to folks who are kind of co-creators of Pandora. So it runs the gamut, and we invite you all to get involved.
Great. I don't see anybody lining up here for questions, so I guess I'll ask another one. So Melissa touched on the DC entrepreneurial ecosystem. Some of you have lived in other places or worked in other places. Tony, you mentioned this earlier, how the DC ecosystem's kind of come and gone. How do you view it now? What is it like to be an entrepreneur in DC compared to what you think it might be like in other cities?
So I hear two questions there. What is it like compared to other cities? I just came from the Bay Area this morning. Everything you hear is true. Out there, it's a fact of life where DC is a government town, the Bay Area is a startup town, and just go hang out at a coffee shop. Literally, you go hang out. There's a zillion noodle shops you can hang out at, a zillion coffee shops. It's just everything's. It's just at such a grander scale that it's just a way of life there. Manhattan over the last couple of years, especially with this drive to a lot of social internet-oriented commerce sites and other networking sites. I was up there last week. There are 800 venture-backed startups in Manhattan alone. It's insane, the amount of activity there. And the reality is the DC area, I was born and raised here. And as much as I want this to be a hotbed, it's still kind of a slower area. Though I will say, over the last year or two, especially with a lot of newer companies like Living Social, really injected a lot of life into the DC area and created that this kind of early ecosystem and desire of people wanting to do startups. That's really picked up here, and I haven't seen that energy since when I tried to start doing this back in the mid '90s when Mario Marino was doing his Netpreneur thing, and the first internet wave was hitting the ground with UUNet being here and AOL being here, that people really had some high expectations. That kind of hit a trowel and has really come back.
Just need more Georgetown folks like Tim O'Shaughnessy, right?
There you go.
There you go. Any other thoughts on kind of what it's like to be at DC these days?
I spent 10 years as well working in Baltimore. I live outside of Annapolis, so I can compare Baltimore and also my days in Chicago. I was surprised, I mean, the difference in time. I mean, Baltimore has a lot of sort of young, interactive-oriented companies there with a lot of a decent talent base as well. And it's not far. You get acclimated to the drive. So I would certainly consider that as another location, as well as Northern Virginia, that are all, I think, geographically accessible from here while you're certainly in school. And Chicago was a long time ago, back in the sort of mid to late 80s, but it was fun as well because the internet was just starting. So it was another big city with people willing to take chances. And I feel personally that where we are again, I went through sort of the internet piece. Mobile is sort of in its infancy now, but starting to mature, and now the space that we're in terms of data, which is certainly the front page of everything you read on sort of the Facebook, Google side of privacy and transparency. But when you really start to think about treating data as an asset class that you own and can benefit from, I feel like we're starting again in terms of a new place. So it's exciting, and I think there's a lot around here as well.
I think DC gets poo-pooed a lot, and sometimes even by me, but I think that people have to realize it's what's here. I mean, there's tons of education startups that are here. In Cleveland, it's a hotbed of activity for alternative energy companies. I think New York media, Stanford, Palo Alto, Stanford. So I think it's being mindful. I think there's tons of entrepreneurial opportunities. I mean, I will say we have tons of high-net-worth clients here, so there's tons of potential investors. But I think it's really figuring out where do you need to be in light of what the environment supports. This is not necessarily the place to be, a high-tech startup, just because the dollars and volume of money required, nor do we have this plethora of engineers coming out of the area schools. So I just think that DC is a hotbed. It would be interesting to see what Ted's new venture does in terms of what that orientation is. But we shouldn't lose sight of the AOLs of the world and others. It's just, I think we haven't really found as strong a niche as we have, say, in New York City around media or New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
right.
I don't definitely not the place to people generally think for a tech company to be. And it has given us a very interesting perspective as opposed so you go to the Bay Area, San Francisco, and we try to get out there, at least once a month, and so you get acclimated to the red eyes. Because usually we're out there at least more than that. But then you come back, and it's nice to be outside the echo chamber. It's nice to be able to not listen to all the noise that's there and just work on your own thing. And I think working in a small town like New Hope, it's a very tourist town, and probably no one has heard of it because it's that kind of town. But it's a great place to be because it really helps the company be more like a family in a way, because we all hang out at the downstairs at the restaurant there, and we all walk to the Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks that are a block away all together, and it's just a very different feel than being in a larger city. But at the same time, there are definitely drawbacks, like needing to do the red eyes all the time. But also, when we were raising our Series A, we ran into some trouble at first, only because one of the firms that we were speaking to, we had gone actually pretty far with them, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, could you move to New York City or to San Francisco? I was like, no, we're not going to do that. And the reason they always cite is because there's sometimes it's hard to find people, or it's hard getting there. Getting there, it's actually not that hard. Come on, there's trains, planes, you get there. But the talent part, I think finding good talent is hard anywhere, and we have a really, really great team, even though we're in New Hope, Pennsylvania. It's one of those things where you recruit from outside. We've recruited from Texas, we've had people come from Florida, from California, and you bring the great people great people, great talent to where you are, but also there are people in that area, because now New York City is becoming huge for tech as well, and Philly is also growing, and so I think now that there are a ton more entrepreneurial hotbeds than there used to be, and it's good to see.
Yeah, I just want to add, one more thing is, having spent, over a decade in San Francisco, what I noticed there were people had an idea and they just went with it, and they didn't care if the geography was better than New York or DC, or they just did their thing. And then you go to New York, which has really taken off as an entrepreneurial hotbed, and you have Mayor Bloomberg as being this, spokesperson for that region, and he's done a lot to really rally people to New York. I think in DC sort of lacks pride. And I hear this again and again. I just moved back to the East Coast a couple years ago, and everybody is just down on DC. And there's always this debate on, whether we're going to come back again from, where we were in the late 90s. But I think if we could get, just a grassroots movement, or, a senior figurehead like Ted Leonsis or Steve Case, or someone to just bring this region together, I think, there's a lot of really disparate developments that are going on, combined with this lack of pride that's like keeping everybody down. And so I think it's just, something to think about.
Well, I can say I see tons of optimism, tons of activity. In the 7 years I've been in this town, it's never been better.
Yeah.
We may not be New York or San Francisco, but I think there's a great entrepreneurial community here. So I'm an optimist. So we have time for maybe one or two questions. Yeah, come on up. Just yell it out.
Yeah. My question hopefully is not too elementary, but I think I know two Harvard growers who wish they would have asked it. I keep hearing that this is a iterative process, and there's a lot of vetting that goes on. I'm just wondering how you protect your idea going forward as you're doing all of that.
How do you protect your idea?
You have to be really selective with the information that you disclose, because you can get people to sign an NDA, but some won't. And you have to take you take a big risk when you share too much, I think. I mean, especially if you're raising money or you're talking to the media, you just need to be strategic and selective in what you're able, what you're willing to disclose.
I think you threw us when you threw out the Harvard Rowers because they lost. I mean, they lost. So that's a tough one. I mean, there's law, but I think one aspect of it is that they gave away too much too soon. But also, I don't know if they tried hard enough, right? I mean, something you can share, but you have to figure out what you share and then how fast you can get it to market. You could have a best friend, and as we saw, those still may stand to that. But I think to be able to figure out either how to tweak it so that it's better then, or how do you get to market that?
Yeah, I think it's more important about execution. Everyone's got ideas. You got to assume if you thought of it, there's someone else in 10 other capitals around the globe thinking the same thing. And the real difference is, can you bring the team? Can you bring the capital? Is your life situation at the right place at the right time? And I actually heard an interesting story this week out west when we were pitching some new ideas to raise money. And this is from a top tier VC. They said, look, we wait, and if we hear the same idea come in 3 or 4 times, then we say, it must be a good idea, and we pick who's the best team to go after it. If they hear it 1 or 2 times, it's too early for them. So that was a pretty interesting perspective that I wouldn't realize that they always had this vision that they come in, great idea, here's your $1 million seed or whatever. They try to draw a straight line a few times to kind of prove that out before it even got out of the gate. So it's all execution. I don't think it's the idea so much.
Yeah. If you do need a good intellectual property attorney, you got one right in front of you, Mark Fitzgerald, right there.
And as a startup, you can't afford them, so don't even worry.
Hopefully, it is pro bono work.
As soon as you launch as well, I mean, I was just flashing back to when Excite, LookSmart, and WebCrawler were the best 3 search engines out there, and none of them exist anymore. So as soon as your idea is live, you know, you have to run and constantly keep iterating. And I would say, you know, one piece of advice is don't let the enemy be don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Get to market, and you're never going to be. Don't be a perfectionist. Get out there, get feedback from customers, find out how people are using your product. You know what's good, what's bad. Listen, iterate fast, and if it's a good idea, you're going to be copied quickly, and then it's going to be a race. So.
But there were like 2,000 best deal sites out at one time. I don't know what the latest one is. You got to ask yourself, if you're the only one doing it and you go out there and you're still the only one doing it, maybe there's probably a reason why, right? What do you see that no one else sees, right? So you're either obscenely brilliant or maybe I need to retweet this, rethink this. So.
And we're about to see 16 or 17 of our students pitch their ideas, and one of the things that they expect to get out of it today is to find mentors and advice. And that's one of the things that you fail to get if you never share your idea with anyone else. You never get any help. So there's always a balancing act there. With that, I'm going to close up and thank our panel. Let's all please share me in thanking these folks. And as we transition to our next phase, I do want to ask all of our Hoya Challenge judges, I see many of you in the back, come on down to the front. We've got some seating area for you. I'd like to welcome the MBA applicants. Is that you guys over here? We got some folks here. Welcome. And if you haven't tried any of the tea yet, go grab one from outside while we're transitioning out. Thanks again.